Hello and welcome everybody to ICMDA webinars. I'm Dr. Peter Saunders, the Chief Executive of the International Christian Medical and Dental Association. And today on ICMDA webinars, we've got Rev Dr John Mayer speaking to us about the circle of significance. If you don't know what that is, you're going to be well clued up by the end of this. So today is an opportunity to learn about the circle of significance for world mission strategy. We're going to learn about where over 50% of the world live in just 15% of the Earth's land area. And this circle contains 67% of the world's unreached people groups, as well as 29 of the world's 46 megacities of 10 million plus people. Over 50% of all the world's Muslims live in this circle, as well as the world's majority Hindu and Buddhist populations. The bottom line is that we have 4.2 billion people who live in the circle, but with only 4.2% of these are evangelical Christians. So huge unreached area. And to reach the world and to work strategically for the Great Commission, we have to pray for and reach the circle of significance. That's the bottom line. Reverend Dr. John A. Mayer is a visionary. He's a global strategist, a catalyst, a consultant, a thought leader, researcher, missiologist, professor, and an author. And for 35 years, he's worked globally with over 1,800 churches and ministries from 75 denominations, conducting research, consulting, and strategy in the areas of church planting, movements, city reaching, diaspora peoples, and unreached people groups. He's taken over 28,000 people on a Discover Your City tour in different US cities. John is the creator of the Circle of Significance for World Mission Strategy, and he's also taught college and graduate courses for 24 years. He's the author of the City View Report book, now in its 17th edition, and he has several other published papers and articles and holds 4 degrees. John, it's just a real pleasure to have you here, and we really look forward to getting into your thinking and helping or hearing you really open the big picture for us and paint the strategy for the years ahead in the Great Commission. Over to you, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. Thank you so much. Great to be with you guys today, your network, and I really respect you guys and your work and just really appreciate what you're doing. We also partner with another ministry called Dio Volente. I have their logo there. But also, one of the board members of Dio Volente is part of ICMDA, Dr. Alex Bullock in Africa, in South Sudan, in Juba. So we have a connection there. And I met Dr. Peter at the conference in Louisville, the Medical Missions Conference last November. So that's how we connected. So today, again, the topic is about global mission strategy. And many of you guys are very interested in that. So I wanted to just share about the circle of significance, which Peter gave you the introduction. And I've been working on a book for the last 9.5 years. So the circle of significance came out of that research. Hopefully this book will be published this year. I keep saying that, but I think I'm pretty close. So hopefully later this year, the book will come out. And it's more than just the circle, but the circle was kind of a key piece to it. So let's talk about the circle of significance. That came out of the research. So let me just kind of share the map. You can all see the map, and let me just kind of orientate you on the map, what the colors and things mean. So you can see the different colors there on the screen. So the green color are Muslim majority countries. The 2 white countries in the middle there, India and Nepal, those are Hindu majority countries. The brown countries, I believe there's 10 of them. They are Buddhist majority countries. And then the gray, China, North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, those areas would be majority secular or atheist or non-religious. They have different definitions, but they would be majority those groups. And then the purple, which you don't see a lot of purple in the circle, the purple, and I'm wearing purple, I think it's blue on the screen, but purple is color of Jesus in the Bible, and purple is for the Christians. So When you see purple, that's a Christian country, majority country, the Philippines and little Timor, half an island there down on the bottom of the circle by Australia, uh, by Indonesia there. So you could see the colors kind of paint a picture. So you get a feel of this circle, who lives in the circle. So let's talk about the circle. So Peter already mentioned within this circle is 15% of the world's land area, and a lot of it's water too. There's a lot of water, not a lot of land, but it contains 53% of the world's population. So over 4.2 billion people live in this circle. And the circle, it looks big on this map, but really it's not very big. It's only a couple thousand miles across and then a couple thousand miles, again, including all the water. So it's not very big. 67% of the world's unreached people groups, that's about 7,000 people groups are still unreached in the world. So about 5,000 of the unreached people groups would be in the circle, the majority in India and that area. And the little black dots, you see those dots, those are the mega cities that Peter mentioned in the intro. Those are mega cities, is a city of 10 million or more people in the metro area. So there's 46 megacities in the world, but 29 are right here in this circle. So again, major population areas of highly dense urban areas. So if you just add up those 29 circles, that equals over 500 million people just in those 29 metro areas. So that's more than, I live in the USA, that's a couple 100 million more than live in my country, almost double that live in America. So you could see the highly dense areas, and then there's some, we'll look at later at some maps, there's some very rural areas as well. So one strategy is not going to fit all to reach the circle. The dot, I'll just give you a couple perspectives here. The dot on the bottom there, that little dot on the bottom, that's Jakarta, Indonesia. I've been to Jakarta. Jakarta is about 32 million people in the metro area there in Indonesia on the bottom there. And it's just so big. And that island of Java, just that island there, again, I'm going to give you some perspective. That island has 151 million people living on that island. I live in the state of Minnesota. We have 5.6 million in our state, and our state is roughly the size of that island with 151 million people. So that island has more people living on it than all of Russia. So we're talking huge, dense population areas. And then just another, again, just for perspective, we'll come back to this later. But on the top dot in the brown area there, that's Greater Tokyo metro area. They have 40 million people living in Greater Tokyo metro area, and that's more than all of Canada. So again, you have cities that are greater than countries in population. So when we think of reaching a single city, we have to think it's greater than reaching many huge countries. And again, you're going to have to think about different strategies to reach people. So I just wanted to give you a little perspective on some of those mega cities. Now, religiously, you can see by the colors, it's diverse religiously. So 99% of all the Hindu people in the world are in the circle. They're in India and Nepal. And then 99% of all the Taoists, they would be in China and other places. They live in the circle. 98% of all the Buddhists in the entire world live in the circle in these 10 Buddhist countries represented here. And then we have other religions, the Jain people, they're mostly in India. The Sikh people, they wear the turban on the head, they have the beards. The Sikh people in India, mostly in India, 78% of all the Sikhs in the world live in this circle. And then, like Peter said earlier, 50% of all the Muslims, you don't see a lot of green, but 50% of all the Muslims in the world live in the circle of significance. So the 4 largest Muslim countries in the world are in the circle. On the left, we have Pakistan, where the 2 dots are there. India, although it's a majority Hindu country, is actually one of the 4 largest Muslim countries. And then right in the middle of the circle, you have Bangladesh there. It doesn't look very big, but it's one of the 4 largest Muslim countries in the world. And then on the bottom, those 18,000 islands are Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world. And there are other Muslim countries there, Malaysia and Brunei and Maldives and other places. But just those 4 largest Muslim countries in the world have 2 million mosques in those 4 Muslim countries. If you add up the population of those 4 Muslim majority countries, the 4 largest in the circle, that equals more than the next 16 largest Muslim countries combined. So again, a huge concentration of Muslims in an area that doesn't look like it's too Muslim. If you just look on the map, you don't see it all green like the Middle East or something, but very significant Muslim populations. And then, like Peter said earlier, the bottom line is the bottom line. So 4.2 billion people live here, but only 4.2% are evangelical Christian. So this is why we call it the circle of significance. And we're going to go deeper into it and talk about it, and you're going to ask questions too. But that's how we came up with it. So Jesus said many times in the Bible, we need eyes to see, ears to hear. And that's what the circle's about. We want to see it. This is kind of the God's eye view or the macro view of what's going on there. And, we need to see what's going on, what the needs are, where the gaps are. And in my ministry, we came up with a saying. This is like 29 years ago. You can't do the prayer, care, share unless you know they're there. You can rap to it if you want to, but how do you pray? It rhymes. How do you pray for people if you don't know they exist or their needs? How do you care for them if you don't know they exist or their needs? How do you share the gospel if you don't know they exist? So seeing the circle of significance is the beginning of these eyes and ears that Jesus talked about that we must have. And then we can do the prayer, care, share once we see what's going on, where the need is. So that's kind of the background to the circle of significance. So we're going to go to the next slide here. And most of you will know about the 1040 window. So the 1040 window was created at the Second Luzon Conference in 1989 in Manila, the Philippines. It's on the circle of significance there. And a guy named Luis Bush came up with the idea of the 1040 window. And he premiered it at Luzon, and missions hasn't been the same since. So the 1040 window, the bottom line across is 10 degrees north latitude, just above the equator. And then the top line across is 40 degrees north latitude. So a lot of it covers the circle of significance, but the circle of significance overlays it too. And we're not competing with the 1040 window. We're not trying to replace it or anything. You can see the great need over in Africa and the Middle East. It's all Muslim countries. So we're not saying, oh, don't do the 1040 window anymore. We're just kind of saying here's a part of the 1040 window we want to highlight. So the 1040 window, 95% of all the unreached people groups live in the 1040 window. But you could see in the circle of significance, actually the majority of this 1040 window is where the unreached people actually live. So again, look at the, Africa, Asia there. You could see the difference with the Muslim countries and then the variety in Asia. All different religions are in Asia. And then the little dot, the little blue speck in the middle of the map of the 1040 window, that's Israel. Just that little tiny little blue area. Look, you can barely see it. Surrounded by the sea of green, all the Muslim countries there. So again, it gives you some perspective on how Israel must feel being in the center of all that storm there. So now that you kind of see the orientation here of the circle of significance in relation to the 1040 window, let's look at a few different countries, not all 30 in the 1040 window, but we'll look at a couple different countries, kind of zoom in a little bit and talk about them. And we'll see some other things that we want to take note of for strategy. and reaching out. So the first country I picked is India here. And you can see this is the largest country now in the world. India, for the first time in history, last year, about a little over a year ago, a year and a half ago, India surpassed China in its population, becoming the world's most populated country at 1.4 billion people. China's peaked. China's actually losing people. We'll talk about China in a minute, but India is growing and has surpassed the population of China. Now you can see the 6 dots there. Those are the 6 megacities in India, but they're not all evenly distributed. There's 2 in the north and then 4 in the south of India. And then if you look on the map, you can see 50% of the people of India they live in like a third of India. And then the other 2/3 of India, the other 50% live. So in the northern part of India, there's more people, there's more populace. So again, it's not an even distribution, and that's true of every country. Some countries, the majority live in just one city even. So again, thinking about how do we reach India, you could target megacities, but you could also target where the population majority is. So India, like I mentioned before, it's a Hindu majority country, but actually 15% of India is Muslim. So there are 400,000 mosques in India. That's second only to Indonesia for number of mosques. And actually, it's a growing Muslim country, even though it's majority Hindu. By 2050, 25 years from now, India will be the largest Muslim country in the world, as well as the largest Hindu country. So that'll be very interesting to see. But we definitely need to target not just Hindus in India, but we need to target reaching Muslims in India, starting churches with Muslims. So by 2050, there'll be 311 million Muslims living in India, which is almost as many people live in America. So again, it's a huge concentration of Muslims, but often we overlook that just because we think it's mainly a Hindu country, which it is. So again, you can see each country needs its own strategy, different people groups, different concentrations, different megacities. And India is very rural as well, so you have huge contrasts. So let's look at the next slide, China. China is even more dramatic in its population distribution. So on the right, excuse me, on the right side, which is Eastern China, you have all the megacities. You have, I think it's 12 megacities there, and you can see them on the map there. And then, so 94% of all the Chinese live on the right. And then on the Western China, it's very rural. Only 6% of the Chinese population lives in over half of China. It's like 40%, 60% pretty much distribution. And the people that live on the left are not actually Chinese. Most of them are Tibetan Buddhists and they're Uyghur Muslims. So again, reaching China, you'd have to, reach different languages and different religions on the left. And on the right, you would, focus on Chinese, and there's different dialects of Chinese as well. And so again, on the right side, you might use more of a city reaching strategy with some of these large Chinese metro areas. And on the left, it would be a very rural ministry. And again, to Uyghur Muslims and Tibetan Buddhists. So again, very, very different kind of strategies. Even though it's one country, it's really, as you can see, it's really at least 2 or 3 countries. So again, just think about how we reach out for strategy, for city reaching, these kind of things, church planting. So let's go to the next slide. Again, we're just zooming in a little bit on a few of these countries because I just picked some different ones to look at. So Indonesia, I've been to Indonesia. I went to Jakarta in the 90, I think in 1997, I was in Jakarta for a couple months. But you could see that's that island of Java I talked about. where you have 151 million people living, and which is more than all of Russia. And again, it's not a big island. It's not the biggest island in Indonesia. It's not the biggest island in the world. You have some major cities, but the one mega city, Jakarta, 32 million people. Jakarta is actually so big they have to create a new capital. They're going to move it to another island because they're out of space. So Jakarta, I mean, Indonesia again has this uh, population distribution that's definitely not equal. So 56% of all the Indonesians live on that small island of Java, and the rest of the other 44% of Indonesians spread out over 18,000 islands. So again, in Jakarta, you're going to use a metro urban strategy, and most of the rest of Indonesia, it's very rural. Many of those islands have very few people or zero people on them, just a few people or very few or none. So again, very contrasted in how you reach them. Now, Indonesia has the most Muslims of any country in the world. So we'll look at another slide. Japan, I've been to Tokyo twice. So Tokyo, there you could see in the red, that large urban area, that's 30% of all the Japanese live in Tokyo, greater Tokyo. And then you see the other two mega cities there, Osaka and Nagoya. But again, Japan is highly urbanized, and then there's a few rural areas as well. But again, 40 million people living in one city. It's very hard to imagine that. Again, it's more than all of Canada combined. So really reaching Tokyo is like reaching Canada. And we need a strategy or strategies, many strategies to reach that mega city. And most of you know, Japan is like 1% Christian. It's just very difficult to reach the monocultural people, the traditions. When I grew up, my next door neighbor was Japanese, Isano Kasahara. Japanese will never say no. So if you ask them a question, they'll say, "Let me think about it," which usually means no. So just even understanding how the culture works is very unique. So we'll look at another country here. Again, we're just going through about half a dozen here. So the next one is in South Korea here. And you can see on top there, the greater Seoul, Incheon area is where 50% of the country lives, right near the border, literally connecting to the border of North Korea there. So Seoul is a mega city. So, it's like 50-50 mega city, and then the rest is pretty rural. Let's see, what else did I want? Oh, so the other thing I wanted you to notice is the blue dot, or not the blue dot, the blue island, very low on the map there, right above the world map. That blue island there is called, I have to look at the name, Jeju Island, and that's where the ICMDA is going to have their 18th World Congress in 2026, June and July 2026. So I'm giving an infomercial for that. So that it won't be in Seoul, it'll be on this island, and there's reasons for that. But many of you will attend that, and we, Dr. Peter and others in the network would love for you guys to come, and you'll literally be in the circle of significance as well. So you can come thinking about that and meet people in the circle. And so they usually have over 100 nations represented at the World Congresses. And so again, just a quick infomercial, put it on your calendar, talk to Dr. Peter, and he can mention it later when we do questions and answers. He can tell you more information, or they can post it in the chat for you. But just think about that. It's less than 2 years away. So, put that on your calendar, and you'll be meeting in the circle of significance. So let's go on to the next one here. So Taiwan is in the news every day, at least in my country. And so there's Taiwan, again, an island country. It's a majority Buddhist country, but 39% live in the capital area of Taipei, near the top there, and then the rest live distributed out in the rest of Taiwan, 61%. You can see there's little islands. We don't hear about the, look at how close some of those little islands are literally to the coast of China. They're just literally like a rowboat away or something on the top and to the left there. So you can see why China is interested in Taiwan. Literally, some of the islands are just off the coast. So again, Taiwan is very low Christian population, about 3.9% Christian. So again, it's an unreached nation to reach. So again, thinking of strategies, Taipei would be different, more of a city reaching model versus the rural areas. So let's, again, just a couple maps left, and then we'll take some questions here. So the last map, the last country I wanted to show you is Mongolia. And I've showed you a number of countries, some of the largest in the world. This is one of the most rural countries in the world. So Mongolia is about 3.3 million people in this area, this land area. And look at about half live in just the capital. And then the rest are just totally rural area. It's got the Gobi Desert, goes through here, the Mongolian steppe. So it's a very, it's a landlocked country. It's a Buddhist country. So again, very, very hard to reach. Before 1990, it had been a communist satellite country. And before 1990, there were about 40 known believers, Christian believers in Mongolia. And they've been having what we call a quiet revival. So since the last 35 years or so, there's over 50,000 Mongolian Christians now, and almost 900 Mongolian churches. Many of them are house churches, but they're churches. And it's growing. And so God's been doing a great work the last 30 years, 35 years in Mongolia. There's like a quiet revival. So our time's almost up. So let me go to the end slide and give you some of my contact information and just kind of close here. And then we'll take questions. So get your questions ready for Dr. Peter.
You've really got the big picture there going forward.
Thank you.
And it's facts which drive strategy. We think about the Lord's promise that the gospel would be preached to all peoples, and then the end would come, Matthew 24:14, and the Great Commission to take the gospel to all nations. John, I was really struck, and I think that this may be news to a lot of people. A lot of people tend to associate Islam with North Africa and the Middle East, and yet, you've shown us very clearly that the four biggest Muslim countries in the world are actually all within the circle of significance: Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, and that India is going to become the major Muslim country in the world. When is it? Was it by 2030?
By 2050. By 2050, it will pass up Indonesia.
Less than 30 years, coming. And so there's a big challenge for us there. And of course, as you've said, 4.2 billion people within the circle, but only 4.2% of those are Christians. Or evangelicals. And the two countries you highlighted as being Christian, which are the Philippines and Timor-Leste, of course.
They're mostly Catholic.
Philippines is 85% Catholic. I think Timor-Leste is probably 99% Catholic.
Correct.
So not a lot. And also the other big trend, of course, that you highlighted was that this is big mega cities. That's where the people are in these countries, not in the rural areas. Now, mission, of course, has been historically, and particularly this is true of healthcare mission, I think, much more rural than city.
Correct.
So I'd just be interested in your thoughts about how these facts and this emerging situation is going to, what the implications might be for healthcare mission specifically, and what kind of change we might need to be making and grasping at ICMDA.
Sure. So let me take a stab at that. So the cities, yeah, we're becoming more urbanized all over the world. And these are just, a few maps, but um, it's pretty much around the world. We're getting bigger cities, and you're right. Most of missions has been geared toward rural. That was where the need were. The strategies were more rural. But now, with people moving to the city, do we totally give up on rural? No, we don't. It's both and now, not either or. But also, the people moving to the city often are diaspora people, or even within their own country, they're coming from rural areas. They're moving to the cities for jobs. So they may live in a big city, but they're going to still kind of have rural values and rural thinking. So they're kind of bridging. The first generation coming to the cities is very rural in their thinking and orientation. And so, like, I live in Minneapolis, and we have the largest Somali population in the world. And my next door neighbor is Somali, and across the street. And when they come to America, they've never used a toilet, they've never used a refrigerator, they've never used air conditioning, these kind of things. And so there is still a need to orientate people from the rural areas, and maybe they never had health care, in the rural area. So there's still a need, kind of a bridge, even if they're in the urban area. Don't think they're very urbanized. They're just they might have just moved there, or still have the values of a rural kind of setting. So medical missions could still operate in the urban area uh, by connecting kind of with the rural. You could use similar strategies, is what I'm saying, and even help them adjust. They have some new needs, like, well, how do I get health care? I don't know about health care and stuff. So you could act as a bridge for them as well, kind of an advocate, or someone to help them transition into that culture. That's usually what people need. They need kind of someone to show them how to operate. So I think it actually creates more opportunities in the urban area with these rural people moving there, or diaspora people moving. So like in Seoul, Korea, we're going to be there for Lausanne in a couple months. You and I will. There's one church has a church in 16 languages. They don't just have it in Korean. They have a Nepali service. So they're thinking, how do I reach the diaspora people? And they're bridging to these groups. And so there are churches that are starting to do that and think that way. So I think there's still a great need for it, for what you guys are doing, even in urban areas. Sorry, I'm American. I talk long. You asked a quick British question.
No,
Sorry.
no, it's great. A lot of these countries, of course, are what we call limited access countries, or
Yeah.
closed countries. It's very hard for cross-cultural missionaries to get into many of them, particularly those from Western Europe, or the US, which have been traditionally the sending countries.
Right.
And I wonder if you could just comment for us on the role of, first of all, diaspora peoples. You've been met, displaced populations from these countries who are elsewhere, and what kind of gateway they might provide, and how that might shape our missions. And then I want to come back then and talk about the centers of evangelical Christianity within the circle of significance. But first, John, can you talk to us a bit about diaspora peoples and their strategic value in terms of the spread of the gospel and God's kingdom?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have a joke about this, because in my city there's a lot of Calvinists. So I say, is God causing this? If you're Calvinist, God's causing this. If you're not a Calvinist, God's causing this. And people laugh. But no, if you're a Calvinist, God's causing it. If you're not a Calvinist, God's allowing it to happen. But either way, it's part of God's plan. And I think I call it the Great Commission in reverse. So we are sent out, but now God is sending unreached people, like you mentioned, that were hard to get to. God's sending them literally to my neighborhood, literally next door to me, or to places that are easier to access. And they also are more open when they're diaspora. Like I was mentioning, they have greater needs. They're disorientated. They need someone to help them and be a friend with them and help them understand the culture, navigate the culture, teach them how to connect to the culture. And then the kids, the second generation, they're kind of both. They don't fit they're not mom and dad's culture anymore, and they're not the new place where they're at. They're not that culture. They're what we call third culture people. And they have a lot of identity issues. And so again, reaching a first generation immigrant and second generation diaspora person is very different as well. And often in medical missions in these diaspora cities, the children will be fluent in the language of the place, but the parents will not. They will know their own languages or not be fluent in the language of the place where they had to go to. But the children often will come to the medical, they'll be the interpreter for the family with the medical issues and the doctor and the nurses. So again, befriending the children often is a gateway to the whole family. And you could talk to them in your own language or the language of the country. And then the parents like that. The parents like that you bridged with the child. They feel a connection that way. So again, we've often, in some cultures, if you reach the child, you reach the whole family. In other cultures, traditionally you have to reach the parents or the father or the clan leaders to reach the whole clan. So it kind of reverses. So I think there's opportunity there as well. I just think the needs are so great with diaspora people. They come literally with one suitcase or nothing. And I mean, think of all the Afghanis that fled Afghanistan a couple of years ago. I think it was over 100,000. And, just coming literally with very little preparation and going all over the world. And so, they have they're not going back to Afghanistan. They need to figure out the new culture and find a job and so forth. So I think, I think being in medical mission, there's just you have a unique opportunity. Everyone gets sick. So in my city, we have a city hospital where all the immigrants go, and they translate into 256 languages in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So you guys are for sure going to have contact with people that most people will never have contact with because people get sick and they need medicine or they need help. And you're there with the stages of life, babies and death. And so you're there through the transitions of life too, which are key moments for anyone. And when they're hurting or when there's a transition, it's an open time to ask questions and dialogue. And I think this is just an ending point. Asking questions is what I do. So they asked Jesus 183 questions in the Bible, and he answered 3. He would say, "What do you think?" Or what do they say? Or he would tell a story, or he would dialogue, the oral culture. And so I think just asking questions and asking about their culture and connecting that way, asking them what does their name mean, and I always tell them my name means John. It means God is full of grace or grace, and Peter is a biblical name, and ask what their name means, and there's just a lot of easy ways to connect to culture immediately, and they like, oh, you value names, we value names, and so anyways, just dialogue, and then the doctors, as you know, have the ministry of presence, just being there, listening, trying to figure out what's going on, and just this ministry of presence while people are suffering or hurting. That's very impactful on every culture. So again, I think you guys have huge, unique opportunities to share the gospel in word and deed,
Yeah, amen to that.
Sorry, I'm preaching a sermon. I know you're not going to take it off.
Of course, the whole reason ICMDA exists is that we dream of a Christian witness through doctors and dentists in every community and in every
Yes.
nation. And that's because
Yes.
doctors and dentists can get into places that
Yes.
many other people can't
Yep.
in the world because of their professional ticket, if you like. And I
Yep.
think everyone listening to this is going to be identifying with this huge shift to big diaspora populations abroad. I live in leafy green St Albans, just north of London, and we've had 5,000 Bengali Muslims here for the last
Yes.
50 years or so. But
Yes.
but other than that, it's been pretty monocultural Southeast English. But in the last 2 years, we've had a huge influx of Hong Kong Chinese. We've had 50 Hong Kong Chinese families join our church alone in the last 2 years. Had to appoint a pastor. My son is living in Cardiff, the capital of Wales, and
Wales.
in the middle of a huge Somali population there, rather like Minnesota. So, and as you've been describing these gateways, and of course the cities, the people who migrate to the cities are all leaving family behind, but staying in touch with them, sending money back. So actually, when those people come to Christ, they become a gateway back into the rural areas.
Correct. And you're right. I mean, they keep those bonds through telecommunication and social media, and they're often sending money back and so forth. So there's a great connection that way back to the home countries.
John, I wonder if I could just get you to talk about the evangelical Christian centers within the circle of significance.
Sure.
Because there are some places where there are large numbers of evangelical Christians relative to the population, and these are clearly going to be really strategic centers of sending in the future. And it may well be much easier for people already within the circle of significance to be doing mission, than people coming from outside into the circle of significance. So just talk us through some of the main evangelical Christian centers in the circle. You mentioned Korea, of course, already.
Yeah, I see these as kind of beachheads into the circle of significance. So you're right, there is some activity. So Seoul, South Korea, as we know, some of the largest churches in the world are there. South Korea is about 30% Christian, mostly evangelical. So that would definitely be a beachhead into the area. And you could see it's, you could go to North Korea or China or Japan or, there's many places you could go from there. Now, there's a lot of issues culturally, like Chinese don't get along with Koreans and Japanese don't get along with Koreans. And, so there's issues where maybe someone else is better to go to certain countries because of the issues. But that's a strategic base.
Wonder if we could come back to China, John, and Howard Lyons, who's on the call, one of our board members, actually, who himself has traveled very, very widely helping to set up Christian health systems in different countries. But he's asking the question, what do you think of the prospects of Chinese Christians being the main mission force in the circle over the next 25 years or so?
Yeah, I think the Chinese had a vision. At one point, they called it back to Jerusalem, and they were going to follow the roads back to
the Silk Roads.
And that's how I think that was a great strategy. But I agree. I think China could be a mobilized force. I think if I were to bet money, I'm not a gambler, but I would bet on China and Indonesia and India. Those three together. There seems to be a strong outreach focus, a strong vision to reach beyond their own people group, a strong mission orientation with and Korea, South Korea as well. So those four, and so also I think the Philippines as well. But yeah, China, I think really, I mean, the rate of growth and what they've done with nothing, they had no missionaries, no pastors, they were thrown in jail, and this house church movement. And they're very committed, and so I think they could be I think they already are a strong mission force, and I think they will become more and more. So I applaud what they're doing and have done. And, we can learn a lot from the Christians in the circle of significance because they know how to pray. They know how to work in their, in a very much similar culture than the first century Christians dealt with, where the majority was not with them and they thrived. And so I think there's a lot to learn from our brothers and sisters in these countries, especially China.
Now, John, you've given us a great picture of the situation as it is now. You've made a few projections with talking about Muslims in India and so on. But I know they say it's extremely difficult to prophesy, and especially with regard to the future. But I wonder just your thoughts on some trends within the circle of significance and their relevance for mission. What do you see as the main trends over the next 30 years that we're going to see?
Yeah, I'm not a prophet, so don't stone me if I'm wrong, but I'll make a few and there's some in my book as well. But I think the mega cities are going to continue to grow bigger, bigger. We're going to have more of them. There'll be 4, 5, or 6 more in India by 2050. China actually will not add. They're actually going to lose a couple of the mega cities. Their population will drop below 10 million, and they'll gain a few too. So they're basically going to stay about the same. But India will grow some more. Um, I think Christianity, there is some pockets of growth that are huge. India, I think, could double in size for Christians in the next 25, 30 years. I think China will continue to grow. It's slowed down. It was growing I have some other data, but it grew very rapidly, and now it's kind of plateauing as the population is declining. But so it's still going to grow, but not at the rate it has been. I think Philippines is picking up. Korea is also plateauing. They had the huge growth in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then they're kind of more secularism in South Korea as the economics go up. Let's see, what else? Mongolia, I think, again, more of a quiet revival. I think it's very steady, very good growth. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not a big country. But for where it was to where it is, it's very good growth. I think the other trend that I've been talking about is Africa is actually the next powerhouse to the world. The average age in Africa is 18 years old. So Africans are going to be exported all over the world just to work and to live and to keep the economies. Even China probably will be importing Africans to keep its economy growing. And so I think, part of the strategy to reach Asia is to help Africa see its role in the world. Like, there are 600 million Christians in Africa, which is more than double the people living in America. And so by 2100, I won't be here, but by 2100, 83% of the world will be African or Asian. 83%. So by 2100, it'll be almost 50, like 40%. It'll be slightly more Asian than Africa, but Africa is growing. So Africans need to have a vision to reach Asia as well, or at least partner with Asia. But I think Asia by itself probably can't reach itself. It's not that it's bad. It's just so many people and so diverse religions. It doesn't need a lot of help, but it needs some help to reach it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we're seeing huge numbers of African students, just as we saw African students training in medicine and other specialties all over the former Soviet Union, who have been a great influence for Christianity. In the same way now, there are Africans studying all over China who get free access to it, learn the language and so on. So
the other piece is China is going to Africa. So they're building this roads and canals, and they built the railroad, the transcontinental railroad across Kenya. And so, we could train, Africans to reach Chinese in Africa.
Yeah.
These Chinese workers and businessmen are coming to Africa, and we could train them to reach out to the people, the diaspora, or the workers in Africa, and then they would take the Christianity back to China or wherever. So there's a lot of different things we could do.
Yeah, very exciting. I'm very sorry, but we've run out of time. There's a lot more we could talk about.
Thank you so much for your help, and I really appreciate your network and all that you're doing.
Oh, it's been great. It's been great to have you, and we just pray that God really continues to empower and bless you and give you these insights and open the doors to you be able to spread these insights as well, because they are so important in informing mission as we move forward. And I think also people listening will have been hugely encouraged to hear about the growth of the church in areas of the world that they may not be aware of. And a lot of it's happened very recently. But as the Lord said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail. And we're living at a very exciting time in history where God's kingdom is extending. And I think it's particularly encouraging for those of us who live in parts of the world where that doesn't seem to be happening to the same degree to know. So thank you so much, John. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on ICMDA webinars. May the Lord bless you.